Hey gang, I wanted to talk to you today about three physiographic regions: the Appalachian Highlands, the Piedmont, and the Gulf Atlantic coastal plain. I drove down from campus to Virginia today to help you see, visualize, get a sense of these three very different regions, three very different landscapes. Because I'm in Virginia, we'll be focusing more on the Atlantic portion of the Gulf Atlantic coastal plain, but the same ideas apply throughout. While I'm down here, we'll get a chance to visit and look at the fall line, and we'll get plenty of opportunities to practice the 5 components of location: place name, absolute location, relative location, site, and identity. According to my GPS, the absolute location of my spot is 78 degrees, 11 minutes, 22 seconds west longitude, 38 degrees, 56 minutes, 44 seconds north latitude. The name of this place, however, is Front Royal, Virginia. According to the Front Royal, Virginia website, there are several competing stories about how this place got its name. None of them are supported by overwhelming evidence, so we don't have as many clues as we'd like about this place name. What we do know is that this particular place was established as a colonial frontier outpost as the colony of Virginia was pushing farther westward off of the Piedmont and trying to get into the Appalachian Highlands. Again, according to the Front Royal website, the identity of this location is it is the gateway into the Shenandoah National Park, and it is the gateway to which you enter the famous Skyline Drive. The reason I'm here today is because of relative location. Front Royal occupies a very interesting relative location. It is in Virginia. It is in the Great Valley of the Appalachian Highlands, and it is situated very close to where Interstate 81 intersects or connects with Interstate 66, which runs east of here and connects to Washington, D.C. All right. So what we have is this is a crossroads community. It is situated in the Great Valley, which has been a conduit for transport ever since the prehistoric times, and via the connections with the railroad you hear in the background, the river traffic that used to flow through here, and the interstates, what we have is this nexus, this crossroads location that facilitates transport. Why Front Royal is here is because it is nestled in a spot, in a gap in the Blue Ridge. It is one of the few places where you can easily cross the Blue Ridge on foot or in your car or in a truck without having to do all those switchbacks. And that gap allowed this place to be connected to Washington, D.C. in ways that other places just a couple miles up or down valley just cannot be. Despite its name, the Great Valley isn't a singular valley. Rather, it is a chain, a string of smaller valleys that extends nearly 1,200 miles all the way up from Quebec down into Alabama. If you were to talk with the folks around here, they would call it the Shenandoah Valley. If you were to talk with the folks up near campus in Cumberland County, they would call it the Cumberland Valley. So the Shenandoah Valley, the Cumberland Valley, the Lebanon Valley, the Lehigh Valley, even the Hudson Valley, the Roanoke Valley, all of those are simply the local names of their local rivers that follow a portion of this great valley. Now, this Great Valley is one of the defining characteristics of the Appalachian Highlands. It is a landform that is so long and so large that astronauts can see it from space. And the important part of it, again, has been used as a transportation corridor for millennia. We know that the Native Americans used it. We know the colonists used it. and certainly via Interstates 81, we continue to use it today. This is a pretty cool location. Hey gang, according to my GPS, the absolute location here is 78 degrees, 6 minutes, 8 seconds west longitude, 38 degrees, 52 minutes, and 40 seconds north latitude. The name of this place is Mosby Spring. The word spring gives us a pretty good clue. There's a natural spring here. The word Mosby required a little bit of research, but I found that this spring is probably named after the Confederate colonel that famously patrolled these parts, conducting guerrilla-type warfare during the Civil War. There's a couple of interesting things about this location. One, I'm about 2 hours south of Shippensburg. Front Royale is about 6 miles to the west, and Washington, D.C. is about 60 miles to the east. This spot is situated in the gap in the Blue Ridge, over which Interstate 66 and Virginia Highway 55 both cut through. Trail's just a couple hundred yards behind me, so through hikers will stop here and use various places around here as primitive campgrounds. But probably the most interesting thing about this spring is this is the head of the Rappahannock River. This is where the river emerges from somewhere underground. So the actual beginning of it, we can't see. It's in the earth somewhere. But here's where it comes out of the earth, and it begins its 200-mile descent down off this broken part of the Blue Ridge, through the Piedmont, and into the coastal plain, on its way out to Chesapeake Bay, and eventually to the Atlantic Ocean. It doesn't look like much of a river here, because we're at the headwater. It is merely a foot wide at the most, and no more than a couple of inches deep. But the farther downslope we go, you'll see the nature and character of this river changes. As far as an identity, this place is not famous. Among those who do know of it, probably most of them know it as a campground along the Appalachian Trail. Earth scientists, hydrologists, folks who are interested in water probably know it as the headwaters of the Rappahannock River. Hey gang, I am here at Kelly's Ford, Virginia. I am situated in the middle of Virginia's Piedmont region, and again, I'm using the Rappahannock River to guide my journey from the Appalachian Highlands to the Atlantic coastal plain. According to my GPS, our absolute location is 77 degrees, 46 minutes, 50 seconds west longitude, 38 degrees, 28 minutes, 38 seconds north latitude. Again, I'm about 2.5 hours south of Shippensburg, and I am situated in the middle of Virginia's Piedmont region. The name Kelly's Ford gives us two clues. The word Kelly, if we trace it back, comes from the Irish immigrant who named this place after himself, John Kelly. The word Ford tells us something about the river itself. Being that it's wending its way through the Piedmont, there's not a lot of flat ground here. There's a lot of rolling, hilly topography, except for this place. This is a place where the river is shallow, and it's called a ford because it's shallow enough for people to cross on foot or on horseback. And because it's one of the few places where people can cross, and it's one of the few places where there is a bridge behind me to cross, it was one of the few places where tens of thousands of troops did cross during the Civil War. Most military historians would argue that this is the most crossed over and the most fought over section of river throughout the entire Civil War. Now, this site doesn't look like much today. It's merely a boat launch, but its identity is definitely intertwined with that Civil War history. Hey gang, I'm coming to you from Fredericksburg, Virginia. According to my GPS, I'm located at 77 degrees, 28 minutes, 6 degrees west longitude, and 38 degrees, 19 minutes, 12 seconds north latitude. Again, the name of this place is Fredericksburg, Virginia. What clues does this name give us? Well, Frederick traces its roots back to colonial Virginia, when this place was named after the son of King George II. And the word burg, we have a lot of burgs in Pennsylvania. Burg is another word for fortress or city. So I am standing in Frederick's City. Well, I'm not in the middle of downtown. I'm standing right next to the Rappahannock River, a little farther downstream. Fredericksburg developed as one of colonial Virginia's frontier outposts when population growth and development was moving from the coast inland. And at one point in time, this would have been the frontier, the farthest west they have gone. And there's a particular reason why they stopped here. And that is because we are standing on the fall line. This is the geologic contact between the Piedmont region that is composed of erosion-resistant bedrock, very rugged, very old, very hard to move, and the sandy coastal plain. I'm literally standing on beach sand right where this transition occurs. And Fredericksburg is one of the few places where that transition happens. It's conspicuous, it's obvious. You can see on one side of the bridge it's rock, and on this side of the bridge it's sand. In other places along the fall line, it's more of a gradual or a zone of transition from Piedmont to coastal plain, but here the transition is almost exact. You can see the rolling topography of the Piedmont dip under, and you can see the sandy sediments of the coastal plain cover the Piedmont at this location. And the reason that's important is because that bedrock posed a navigational barrier for boats that were moving upstream. You could go all the way from the coast all the way inland up here using watercraft at the time, but you couldn't go any further. One does not simply go upstream and survive the rocks, rapids, or waterfalls that await you. Nearly every river that carries water from the Blue Ridge down through the Piedmont, onto the coastal plain, out to the Atlantic Ocean, literally falls off what we call the fall line. Fredericksburg is just the fall line city that developed along the Rappahannock River. You go farther north, the fall line cities include Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Trenton, New Jersey, all the way up to New York City, New York. The farther south you go, you've got Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. And a bunch of other smaller places in between. And each one of those points marks the transition of a river falling off the Piedmont into the sandy, softer sediments of the coastal plain. And what that has done, it shows us the relationship between physical geography and human geography. Here we see the physical landscape change influence human decision making. And as we go up and take a look at Google Earth and look down at the satellite imagery of this place, you can see the human geography that has left the footprint on the modern landscape was influenced by the physical geography as it was encountered and explored by the early colonists of the 1700s. Right. Would Fredericksburg, Virginia be here today if it was chosen today? Probably not. You can see the river is not being used for transporting goods up and down the way it used to be. But the reason it is here is because this is the spot that was picked at the moment in time when moving things by boat was the primary mode of transport. And that fall line was a navigational barrier that prompted people to stop, unload the boat, dig a canal, portage upstream or portage downstream. And this city developed around all of that human activity. Hey gang, I am in Tappahannock, Virginia. I am on the south shore of the Rappahannock River, which you can see behind me. It is wide. It is a mile wide at this point, and so is that bridge span. According to my GPS, this place is mapped at 76 degrees, 51 minutes, 22 seconds west longitude, and 37 degrees, 55 minutes, 47 seconds north latitude. Now, the place name Tappahannock gives us two interesting clues. One, it's derived from the native Rappahannock peoples who occupied this site before the Europeans found it in 1608, John Smith. Now, when we translate the word Tappahannock into English, what we find is it means this is the place where water rises and falls. And that's a dead giveaway that we are situated in the tidewater portion of the Atlantic coastal plain. This is where the Rappahannock River is no longer just a river, but an estuary, where it is constantly being fed fresh water coming downstream, again from the Blue Ridge across all of the Piedmont. You see how large it is, so it's collecting water from all sorts of creeks, streams, and tributaries that are pouring into it. But it is also being infused with salt water as the tides move inland. And so what we have is an estuary with a saltwater freshwater exchange. In fact, you can smell and taste the hints of salt in the air just standing here. All right. Now, this site is obviously one of the oldest towns in Virginia, and being that, it's one of the oldest towns in the United States. But despite that early head start of being over 400 years old, Tappahannock just never developed into a large city or major metropolitan area because other places upstream or downstream were just better suited for commerce. All right, gang, I think I'm going to conclude here in Tappahannock. The Chesapeake Bay is still an hour's drive east. I'm losing sunlight too fast and too quickly. That said, I think I've accomplished my objectives today. I introduced you to the Appalachian Highlands. We visited two provinces, including the Great Valley and the Blue Ridge. We crossed the Blue Ridge through the gap at Front Royal, and we found the headwaters of the Rappahannock River, where it was no wider than a foot wide and a couple inches deep. We traced its route through the rolling topography of the Piedmont. We watched it fall off the Piedmont into the sandy coastal plain in Fredericksburg. And now you can see in those sandy sediments how it's broadened itself, it's expanded itself, and it's meandering through the soft coastal sediments, carrying this water all the way out to the Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic Ocean. Thanks, gang. Have a good night.